Welcome to the Fusion Cell Podcast, The Military Effect. I'm your host, Jack Heath. Fusion Cell, the founding mission was and still is to this day, the mission bridging the gap between military talent and the civilian workplace. Our cellmate guest today, Tiffany Bradbury, joining us from the Fusion Cell team. Tiffany, thank you so much, and thank you for your service in the military.
Thank you so much, Jack, for having us and giving us this opportunity.
Well, before we begin talking, you're a senior career agent now working with members of the military and helping to bridge the gap between the military and the civilian sector. But you are a superintendent in the military. Define that in layman's terms.
Okay. I spent 23 years approximately in the Air Force, and I say I basically went full circle. So, I joined as a young enlisted member, freshly out of a couple years of college, didn't complete it. And so I actually had a break in service, got out of the Air Force, and then was able to come back in, fortunately, because I miss wearing the uniform every day. And I came back in recruiting, talent acquisition. And so ultimately, my career led me to being a superintendent of enlisted accessions and policy. So basically what I did is work for the career field manager who managed the recruiting aspect of the Air Force, and we developed policies at the Pentagon and guided the senior leadership towards what our targets were and how we were going to meet those.
Hence the perfect addition and transition as a senior member of Fusion Cell, given that background. You mentioned miswearing the uniform, sense of service, that much time in the Air Force. Where does that sense of service and duty come from, Tiffany, personally and professionally? Where does it come from?
Well, I will have to be completely transparent. When I originally joined the Air Force, it was more of a selfish reason. I was looking for something stable. I was looking for a way to support myself without depending on family. And it wasn't necessarily for a sense of service at the time, although I will say that I am adopted. My parents adopted me from Korea. My dad was in the Army at the time. And so I always felt like I owed so much to this wonderful country that I was fortunate to be able to be brought into. And so after I joined the Air Force, I developed that, extraordinary sense of service. I think that becomes part of all of us, regardless of the reason why we joined initially. And it was just amazing to have that sense of purpose every day when you get up and put on a uniform and feel that you're a part of something bigger than yourself.
I love it. Now, Tiffany, Fusion Cell's not new anymore, if you will. It's still growing, but it's penetrating and growing nationally. And I guess the question is, what makes Fusion Cell, of which now you're a senior member, different than other veteran staffing companies or entities?
Well, and I know that this has probably been said before, but when you ask me specifically, I'm going to say that, without sounding corny, it is a perfect fusion of civilian and military talent acquisition and staffing experience. All the way from our founders, including yourself, to our COO, Matt Morrissey, to our marketing people, business developers, and the delivery team, made up of our sources and our recruiters. It's such a perfect blend. It's great to have that military talent that has experience in their own transitions and challenges, but then to also have that corporate staffing experience where that's all that they have done. So we merge those and we all learn from each other and create this, I guess, not really a perfect storm, but it is a perfect storm of talent acquisition specialists. And we can go out and help these veterans and bridge that gap that you mentioned, coming out and not knowing, where to go.
Well, Tiffany, you touch upon several things, and just some thoughts from yours truly for a moment for you to comment on. I'm acutely concerned about the recruiting crisis we're seeing in our branches of military and law enforcement and EMTs and first responders. We have a real need for younger people to enter these areas, National Guard, you name it. The other area, I think, for our corporate business listeners of our Fusion Cell podcast with cellmates like yourself in terms of experts, is what I think Fusion Cell, what sets it apart is people like yourself. It starts with people, starts with a team. I don't care if you're an NFL coach, you can have all the plays and everything, but there's individuals on the field, players, and our team at Fusion Cell, the team there, you give them that background of expertise within the military to get the best people you can recruited into the military. And I've found out from my talking to senior brass or Pentagon officials or generals in the Army is they'll say, Jack, we're real good and we hope we're good, but we need to get good people to come into the military. We want to recruit them, reward them well, set up an environment where they excel in the military, and then retain them. the priority of the military today is not really helping to bridge that gap from military service to the civilian sector. It's really not the mission, if you will. Now, I personally, I don't want to get into it with you, but I think the military could help its front-end recruitment if it does a better job on the exit. But your teammates at Fusion Cell, would you say that is a true differentiator given the depth of the military members that Fusion Cell has?
I would absolutely agree. And we've had those discussions as well. And it's getting better. The transition assistance is getting better within the military. But I do believe that the team brings that aspect that may be missing. You know, we're trying to target military members earlier in their transition process. And maybe they don't get out. Maybe it's just a plan. You know, it's a plan of if this is what it is, if I decide to get out within a year or 2 years, then I know who to contact. I already have the resources necessary to help prepare myself better for life after the military. And yes, 100%, I believe that the team brings this to the table because we have such a diverse set of knowledge that we can pass on to them. And yes, I believe that 100% the recruiting effort could be assisted by preparing our people for transition better on, because what is better word of mouth than saying, I got all of my experience in the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Army, and then, you know, that filters down to people and contributes to their decision to serve.
Tiffany, let's talk about some of the roles you've placed, flexible contracts and overseas roles, and why this is relevant.
So what is great about Fusion Cell, another great thing, we'll just keep talking about how great Fusion Cell is that our business development team does a great job of focusing on companies and opportunities that align with transitioning service members and veteran talent. And so a lot of these roles, I mean, we have everything ranging from corporate roles like senior director of purchasing and subcontracts to mechanics to overseas services and morale, welfare, and recreation type roles. And so that really runs the gamut of what a prior service member may be looking for. And so we kind of have something for everyone, and we can kind of guide those into the role. And I often say that if we have an opportunity that, say, a candidate is not fit for, and maybe they've applied, we go a step further in kind of guiding them in what they may be lacking and what they may have to do to be a better candidate for that position in the future.
You know, I want to switch gears with Tiffany Bradbury, a senior career agent, Air Force veteran, Fusion Cell. And I want to talk about things like, as simple as it sounds, and even though things are changing, whether it's a job candidate's biography or resume. And I want to relay a story with you, Tiffany, you'll appreciate. Years ago, when one of the founders of Fusion Cell, Tony Negron, and I would be meeting with, for example, in our New England region, a returning Navy SEAL. Their spouse may have gotten a job in the medical community. They didn't really know anyone, so we'd meet with them through our network of friends and veterans. And I remember once a relatively young SEAL, we were able to help him get a job at BAE Systems, a defense contractor. He's probably 30-ish. I think he'd done 10 or 12 years, came across professional. But when you talk to him before even thinking about things like resume and how to do an interview, he was really good at telling you about what he was good at in the teams and the SEALs. And he would say, you know, he was pretty good at explosives and that small sub that he was assigned to or whatever he did, and target acquisition and things. And we try to explain to him that that's probably not what you want to lead with on your resume in the private sector. The challenge is to translate the skills you had in terms of being a team leader, in terms of being a motivator, in terms of problem solving, in terms of being prepared, not backing down from a challenge. Those are transferable things. So talk about what a veteran should or should not include in their basic resume.
So the biggest thing is really owning your process, right? Before you even think about what jobs you're going to apply for or what your resume is going to look like, network, contact people within your industry, talk to individuals that have been out in corporate America for a while and came from a similar background as yours, and then discuss how your military experience fits into that industry or that particular role, because that's going to be your biggest educator and your best way to present your experience on your resume, to educate yourself on how you can use the civilian terminology, what's recognized in corporate America. It's really reaching out to those experts that are already in their field and maybe already been in your shoes and just having multiple conversations, because obviously where I can fill a lot of the gaps and help translate some of that information, I can't replace the expertise, say, a cybersecurity individual. So it's very important that when you start thinking about your transition, or even prior to that, thinking about life after the military, is that you start having those conversations with your peers and growing that network of experts so you can really get familiarized with what verbiage you need to use when you're presenting yourself. So I can't stress that enough.
I want to get to the verbiage, being accountable, doing your research, networking, cover letter, all that stuff. But veterans may or may not be good at sort of selling themselves in the civilian sector. In other words, it's probably a different salesmanship or salesperson process when they're in the military, convincing a superior that I can take that next step. I can lead this group. I can do the logistics here. I have what it takes to do this. So a military resume is different than a civilian. What do you say to veterans about whether it's a cover letter or that initial first touch with a corporate HR, recruiter, employer, they're hiring, about selling yourself in a good way and being proud of it, not modest or bashful? You know, say what you did for 20 years in the military. Transfer why that's good for their company. How do you tell a veteran to kind of sell themselves in a positive way and not be reticent to do that?
Yes, that's something that we all kind of struggle with coming out of the military. I know specifically I did, because we're so team-oriented, and we want to take the focus off of ourselves. My team did this, my team did that. And sometimes that's part of the struggle. People say, I have no problem writing feedback or recommendations for my subordinates, but I have a really hard time talking about what I've achieved and what I've done. So if they've done their due diligence and they've networked and they've educated themselves on the corporate lingo as far as demilitarizing it, then it's just about how, and I often say to somebody, don't be afraid to say, I don't have this direct experience, but this is why I can do this job, because I've done my research. I know that this is equivalent to this piece of software that I use in the military, or equivalent to this process. Don't be afraid to tell them why you're capable of doing something.
Or attitude and willing to learn.
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of it. We talk about people that are willing to do the work. More organizations are looking for that person that has the soft skills, that is a hard worker, is going to show up to work every day and is going to learn how to do the job quickly, versus somebody that maybe fit all the blanks, but maybe they don't have that work ethic that they're looking for. But as long as you can speak and explain why you're the best fit, because I tell people, when you're out there and doing the job search, you are running your own company in essence. So if you were trying to promote your company, which is you, would you get out there and speak to as many people as you could about why your company is the best company? Yes, you would, because you wouldn't want it to fail. And it's the same way with the job search and trying to find employment. You don't want to fail. You want to have a job. So get out there and network, explain to people why they should hire you. And at the end of the day, it's not boastful. I mean, obviously you can get those individuals that are like, I can do everything, and maybe they can't. But there's that happy medium where you can put out what you're capable of doing on the table and speak to it educatedly if you've done your research. And typically the right company will take notice.
I guess I want to end with this, Tiffany, and thanks for joining us in this podcast. Recent success stories that you want to highlight or that you're proud of.
This isn't super recent, but I'm really proud of the overseas contract that we filled. We had a really short notice, on-demand task for an overseas contract to provide support. I personally filled 12 of those roles with prior service members. And my team, I think total, we placed 39. And that was within a 2-week period. And a lot of these individuals, a couple of mine ended up staying on full-time with this contractor. And so it provided opportunity for the individuals that I spoke with. They missed that aspect of being in the military, and they wanted to still serve in some way. So it gave them the opportunity to go back there. That was probably the biggest one. But I've also had recent experiences where individuals have been out for a few years and looking for career progression, and we've managed to find them roles as well. So, I'm rewarded every day just by making a veteran feel better, or a transitioning service member feel better about the employment search, knowing that they're not alone in the process, and that companies like Fusion Cell are looking out for them and are standing by ready to assist.
All right. Thank you for bridging the gap, as they say, between the military and civilian world. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us, our Fusion Cell podcast. Until next time, I'm Jack Heath with more Fusion Cell expertise. We'll see you later. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you so much for having me.